Hi everyone, I'm Kavian from the North Shreveport branch of the Shreve Memorial Library System, and this is Lynn. And today we're doing a YA book discussion. The book is The Shadows Between Us by Tricia Levenseller. To give you a basic synopsis of the book, it's about a 18-year-old woman named Alessandra, and she's a little bit power hungry, so she's not your typical YA goody-goody protagonist. She decides, yeah, not at all, and she decides that she wants to be queen. And the only way that she can do that is by getting the Shadow King, who has mysterious powers, but nobody knows anything about him. She wants to get him to fall in love with her so she can get him to marry her, and then she can kill him, and then she's the queen. But of course, things kind of go awry because other people are trying to kill Callias, and she may or may not be also falling in love with him. That's the basic synopsis. I don't think it quite lived up to the expectations, but that's what we're here to talk about. So, Lynn, do you want to tell me what your overall opinions on the book were? What kind of impact did it leave?
Well, my overall opinion was I think it fell flat. I think it completely fell flat. Like the whole premise of the story sounded interesting, if not a little bit cheesy, but it did sound interesting to me. But as it started out with all this attention grabbing stuff at the beginning, and it was very racy, and you just flew past the first couple of chapters, and then after that it just started getting I could just say it just fell flat for me. I didn't see it as anything. It didn't hold my interest at all.
Yeah, I totally agree. I didn't think the premise was that cheesy. I mean, I thought it was like different, at least. Like, this was a book that I was really looking forward to reading. I think I told you how I saw this came out in February, and I was waiting for the library to get a copy of it so I could read it, because I read a lot of YA fantasy, and there is such a cliche of oh, all the girls are they're just misunderstood and they just want people to understand them. And I thought this was going to be a total flip, and they were going to play on the tropes of the genre, and it was going to be a total 180. And in some ways, I think that the author succeeded, because Alessandra herself didn't feel like a typical YA protagonist, but the plot itself, I feel like it didn't live up to the expectations, like you said, because I went into this thinking that we were going to have this amazing protagonist, and it was going to be some epic story about her trying to save the king's life while getting him to fall in love with her. And it felt more like kind of a court fun dresses romp than it did a serious story, if that makes sense.
Right. I really had a problem with that, except for the court and all that setting and all that stuff was just kind of not really evolved enough for me. I didn't find it to be we went into a lot of detail about her dresses and all that, which was, I think a little bit overkill on all that. I mean, I was glad to see that the main character had an interest in sewing and all that, because I like that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So I was really I was a fan of all that, but I just didn't feel like the world itself was that.
It wasn't that distinct.
Defined. I just couldn't figure out what all I personally don't read a lot of YA, but I could not figure out what kind of world this was. It went from one thing, and then it kind of flip-flopped, and it went from everybody was wearing all these beautiful gowns and things, and then and it was real not accepted for women to wear pants, but it never really said why. Mm-hmm. It just wasn't that defined.
I will say that there were some parts of the world that I liked. It didn't have the by the numbers traditional fantasy setting. Of course, all the girls were wearing dresses and the men wore waistcoats, and people have horses and stuff. That's pretty traditional fantasy. But I liked that the palace had electricity and stuff. I thought that was kind of unique. And I did think it was at least kind of unique that she had the option to wear pants. At least that was it was an out of fashion trend, I think she mentioned at the beginning of the book, but came back into fashion because she started doing it. So things like that I thought were a little unique.
I liked the whole beginning where she went to court and she intentionally didn't wear green and she wore black. I think it was. She wore black. Am I getting that right? It's been a while since I
Yeah.
read the book, but and I liked all that part. I mean, that to me was fun and interesting and different. And I thought, oh, okay, this is not going to be, like you said, your typical princess story where she shows up like, in a beautiful gown of pink or blue, and, she, or white, and has all the things, that was going to be more of a darker twist on all that stuff. But like I said, I just think it fell flat. Like, she didn't continue on with this level of expectation that she built up in the beginning of the book.
Yeah. I do agree, but at the same time, I also think that wasn't like the most detrimental part of the book to me. I think the book's biggest problem, because the plot, it may have been like simple and may not have lived up to my expectations, but for the most part, it was like fun enough to read. Like, there were enough little subplots that it kept me interested. But the biggest downfall was that I hated the main characters in this book. Like, I hated Alessandra and I hated Callias, and I didn't really like anybody else in the court. The only person that I liked was Leandros, and he was supposed to be the villain. Like, I wanted him to win. I wanted him at the end, where he was trying to kill his brother, which was a not super well done plot twist in my opinion. His brother is the king. I wanted them to win. I was like, yes, kill them, please. Take them out. That didn't happen, unfortunately. Now, I think I would have liked the book a lot better if it just took a total 180 and he ended up winning and Alessandra's just like, I died, and that was the last line in the book.
Okay, so I did, because I thought that I did not like the king. So I thought, well, if you're going to love to hate Alessandra, that's one thing. But I thought maybe you would be like, I would be rooting for the king, and I would, like it would build up to this moment where you just either like one character or the other. I guess that's what I had in mind when I started reading. I figured you would either really, really like Alessandra and you would want her to succeed in all her evil doing, or you would really, really like the king and you would want him to escape, her evil plot. And it just, neither one of those things happened. It was just kind of like his character was, it was confusing to me. I didn't know where she was going with him. I couldn't figure him out. And then all of a sudden there's like this fluffy dog that comes out of nowhere, which was actually my favorite character.
Really? Yeah. Demodicus, was that his name? It was something hard to pronounce like that.
I don't even remember the dog's name. I just call him Fluffy because, he was like a little fluffy dog. And I thought, oh, that's cute.
I just want to say I spent half the book thinking that he was actually like a bear dog, and that was something that existed in this fantasy world because of the way that Alessandra described him. She was like this bear dog thing, and I was like, wait, they have a bear running around this palace? What's going on here? It took me a long time to figure out that was just a big dog.
I guess, and I just call him Fluffy, a fluffy dog. And I was like, oh, good, a fluffy dog, something actual that's interesting in the book. I'm sorry. Yeah. I just was not the biggest fan of the book. I thought that the writing was very simplistic. For such a creative plot, I just thought it just completely fell flat for me. And I thought that my biggest problem with the book was the conclusion. To me, there was no real
she didn't really like earn anything
between what was happening and all of the things that happened, and then you would go to how it would kind of go up to there, and then no resolution. Just the resolution was kind of like, oh, and the king decided to pardon everything she ever did. It's okay if you killed someone. I still love you. It's fine. I just thought it could have been better done.
I do agree. I think that happened. I can think of like at least 3 times that like I feel like you said, there was a lot of build up to like, oh, things are gonna come to a head. Like, all of her crimes when she murdered her ex-boyfriend is gonna come out, or her dad wants her to marry this other lord that's also being this Robin Hood character, or it's discovered that she wanted to kill the king.
All of a sudden, there's Robin Hood. Did you just like that came out? Blue, didn't it? I mean, all of a sudden it's like, oh, and then there's Robin Hood. I'm like, wait, that's not.
That's another thing. Maybe it's because I was I was reading a Robin Hood retelling earlier this year, but Robin Hood showed up and I was like, yes, steal from these rich, entitled brats. Take all of their stuff.
I was like, no. Yes.
Yeah, but I will admit that was one plot twist that I thought she did well in terms of, I guess a lot of the reason that I didn't like the characters is I couldn't empathize with them at all, which is totally fine when you're writing evil characters. Like there's a way to write like unsympathetic characters well, and I think a lot of that has to do with how they perceive and then how the author portrays the other characters. And I felt that like when it was revealed that this other guy was Robin Hood, but she had kind of set him up to be, oh, he's kind of a nice person, but it's more of a self-righteous type of person. I feel like because she portrayed him as he's not necessarily doing this for the good of people, he's just like kind of a self-righteous, unlikable guy when you know all of him, I was like, oh, okay, I feel a little less bad for him now that he got caught, if that makes sense. Like,
yeah, it does. Well, I was not a fan of either one of the main characters, which is, to me, I mean, even when you read something and there's an evil main character, you still want to feel some empathy toward that character, you know. And to me, she never even, I didn't have one reason to like her, not at all, not one time did I like her in the whole book.
And
or
I mean,
the king. So therefore, I had a hard time getting through it because I was like, I'm not rooting for either one of them. I just assume they perish.
Yeah, that's exactly, that was my thoughts. But I mean, I hate it because I know that this is like a super hard thing to do well. It's really hard to like make a book focusing on what would be the villain in any other story. And it's really hard to do well because if you don't do it perfectly, this is exactly what's going to happen. But like I said, like I love stories like Macbeth and the TV show House of Cards, with those focus on characters who are kind of the villains. But I feel like this book kind of set itself up for failure because personally, I think one of the reasons that stories like that have to work is because most of the time you can't empathize with the main character. You have to be at least slightly disconnected if they're totally unsympathetic, which I would call Alessandra and Callias our main characters. Like you can't be reading their first person thoughts. I think this book may have succeeded better if it was written in a more distant third person. So like it's a lot easier.
I think it would have been much better had it gone between this person thinks this and this, you know, then the second person, then the third person, you know, the chapters being split up into each individual thoughts of each individual person, where you didn't really know what the other person was thinking during that time period. I think that would have been a lot more interesting. I think maybe she had a good, the whole plot of the book was good. Some of the themes that ran through the book were really, I didn't so much really didn't tie together as much as I would like. But I think maybe this may have been a book that she should have shelved until she had a better ending. I'm sorry, it was just felt
that ending was not great.
I didn't like it at all.
Okay, well, spoilers, because this is a book discussion. At the end of the book, you find out that the king's supposedly dead brother, who gets vaguely mentioned a few times earlier in the book, is actually alive, and he's been a guy who's been at court the whole time. And not only is he alive, he's the one who killed the king's parents when made him king, because their dad used to beat him because he didn't have the magical shadow powers. And so he had him beaten, and then he got rescued and taken back to the palace to pretend to just be a random friend of Callias's. And I mean, I guess that's not a horrible twist, like in concept, but I feel like most of it was just literally Leandros telling us what happened at the end of the book. Like when Alessandra shows up because she just figures out, oh my gosh, he was dyeing his hair. That must mean that he's actually the king's brother. Like I was like, where did this come from? Like, where did you figure this out? But she was right.
Out of the blue.
And then at the end, it was just Leandros, the villain, kind of monologuing. He was like, ah, ha, ha, it was actually me the whole time. Let me tell you exactly what happened. And then they have a fight that lasts like a page or something, and then they kill him, and it's the end. Everything's okay again.
Right. The end. And it really, the end could not have come sooner for me
Really?
at this point. But I'm just, I, the worst part of the whole book to me was the resolutions of Alessandra and all of her crimes, all of her evil murdering crimes and blackmailing and all of the devilish deeds that she had done were just swept under the rug and not really resolved. Just like, oh,
Yeah.
it's okay, it's fine. I pardon you for everything. And to me, that was a failure. I think it should. I think that all that could have been much more developed in the story, and we could have at least been worried that she. I think done right, and the character developed a little bit more. We would have been worried throughout the entire book that she was going to get found out, and I don't think that was weaved in the tale as much as it should have been. I mean, it was, you barely thought about that throughout the book, or I didn't. I didn't really constantly be thinking, but they're going to find out she murdered her boyfriend, or whatever his name was, the first lover.
I will slightly disagree and say that, like, I don't know, like, I did personally, probably because I didn't like her, I wanted her to get caught for that. But at the same time, I really was like mildly entertained by the fact that she subverted our expectations by not taking this to like the head. Like it didn't go like the expected way where like, oh, it's all gonna come out during the climax and she's gonna go to jail for this. And then it was kind of entertaining that Callias was like, oh, it's cool, I'll pardon you. But I feel like the fact that incidents like that happen more than once where Alessandra like was dealing with a problem and it just magically went away, the fact that that happened like more than like one time, it's entertaining and it's subverting expectations. Like 2 or 3 times it's pretty annoying because your characters aren't learning anything and they don't have any consequences.
I would have totally liked this book so much better had at the very end they found out that she murdered I don't remember
What was his name? It was Hector with a K. That was
Hector.
Yeah.
He murdered Hector and buried his body in basically the backyard, and they found out, and I would have loved had they come hauled her off to prison and she hanged. I would have, that was so much better ending.
Exactly, yeah.
Way more interesting anyway.
I don't know, but maybe because it's a romance in at least some form, people expect their happily ever after, so they have to end up together and happy at the end. And I mean, I guess Callias and Alessandra, they do deserve each other. They're both horrible people, so they deserve to be together.
That's one thing we can agree on about this book. They are both horrible people and they do deserve each other. So happily ever after to them, and may they have a million kids that are just like them.
Yeah. Okay, well, what did you think of all the romances? There were, I guess, a couple more romances, like with Alessandra's friends, which I guess were mildly interesting. I don't know. A lot of this book was, I guess, court politics and drama and all these like rich people problems. Like, who am I gonna marry? Nobody's gonna want to like date me because I'm not a virgin or anything. And I guess like juxtaposed like against like, oh, taking over like countries and taxing people and murdering people who want like representation. That was like, it all seemed very like trite and annoying and totally unsympathetic to me, you know?
Well, and I thought, I don't read a lot of YA fantasy at all. I mean, I have read a few things, but to me, it was the beginning was so racy and out there, and then it just kind of like everything else in the whole book, it just kind of went to where you're turning the page and then it just disappears, and you're in a court setting where everything is so formal and we're not going to be able to touch and we have to dance apart and all the things. And I'm like, oh, well, wow, that's a turnaround from the beginning of the book,
Yeah.
And then it kind of just went on from there. And I actually thought that maybe they were going to introduce more lovers because she had been so promiscuous in the beginning. And then then all of a sudden she's afraid that, the king will find out. I'm like, that is not her personality that I got from the beginning of the book to the end of the book, that all of a sudden she's afraid the king will find out. And I guess some of that could have been that she was falling in love with the king, but I don't know. It it just kind of led to nowhere. So I wasn't a big fan of the romance element of the book at all.
Yeah. I thought there was actually a lot of chemistry, or at least more chemistry, between her and Leandros, our villain, than her and Callias. Like, for the first half of the book, he's pretty much ignoring her, which I guess is fine for his character arc, like it was necessary, but for like building a connection, you can't build a connection between two characters if they're literally like not sharing any scenes together. So it was hard for me to like buy a relationship between her and the king. But now that I'm thinking about it, you know what I would have loved? I think this book would have been like so much better if she ended up falling for Leandros. He can still have his crazy twist where he's actually the king's brother, but maybe she ends up like falling in love with him, and instead they together plot to take down Callias, and then she can still be queen because he'll take down the throne. He'll take back the throne once everything is like revealed or whatever. I think that would have been so
that. I think
interesting.
that would have been so much better ending.
I
And
know, right?
really think that is a fantastic ending. I would have been all up. It would have changed my perspective of the book if that had been the ending. It really would have.
That would have been amazing. Alessandra would have had.
I'm not a fan of this book. I just didn't like it at all. I'm sorry. I have 2 thumbs down, and that's my little book review from Library Lynn. But and I'm sure that given that I'm not a big YA fantasy fan, that probably has something to do with it. And I don't read a lot of romance and all that, but I do I do like the court drama, and I just found it completely, like I said, too
No. Well, this definitely wasn't one of my favorite books this year. It was a quick read, and I appreciated that, and it was fun at some parts, but I think like the distaste that I had for the main characters was just unforgivable. And the ending was just really poorly done, in my opinion. I wouldn't give it 2 thumbs down, maybe like 1 thumb down and then like 1 diagonal or horizontal thumb or something.
If I could give it like another thumb, I would.
Yeah, if you had 3 hands, okay. But anyway, library, if anybody wants to check it out, not everybody agrees with us. Some people, it has a decent Goodreads score. I think it's 3 something. So some people out there love it, but you won't know until you read it yourself. So thanks for watching our book discussion. And if you want to check it out, hit up the library. And if not, we have thousands of other books you can check out instead.
Yeah, we have like a lot of really, really good reads.
We do. Okay. Until next time, everybody. Bye.
Bye.